Before the episode starts, I just wanted to let you all know that the Thirsty Mage has just launched a monthly newsletter to keep you up to date on all of the important releases, news, and other helpful information from the past month. Head over to thethirstymage.com or click on the link in the episode notes to read our latest issue. You can even register your email to get a nice smartphone-friendly edition delivered directly to your device each month. Now on with the show. Greetings and welcome to The Thirsty Mage, the podcast that's about to take on the role of judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to whether an indie has crossed the line from inspiration to duplication. I'm your host, David Lloyd, and this episode's topic is inspired by the new indie RPG Athenian Rhapsody, an Undertale-like RPG that myself and my co-host have recently reviewed and plan to share our impressions of during this discussion. Said co-host is this man, often replicated but never duplicated, Jordan Rudick.
I was going to make some joke about the Aurora Borealis, but everyone on social media seems to be using the Simpsons meme version of that, so I won't. But it was cool. We went outside last night and we did get to see a little bit of it, even though we didn't like drive outside the city or anything like that. We were literally just outside our house, but you basically just pointed your phone camera up to the sky and you could see it. It was really neat. So I'm glad that. I did get I saw some really good photos that people were posting of the Northern Lights, but it was cool to be able to see it just from our place yesterday.
Yeah, I forgot to look out. I don't know. I don't know if I think I'm more south than you are potentially, so I don't know if it would have been as beautiful. But
yeah,
living out in the middle of nowhere, there wouldn't have been too many lights to screw up the view. So I probably should have, but. It was kind of rainy and overcast though, so I don't even know if we might have had clouds blocking it anyway.
Yeah, see, it's been really clear here for a little while, so it was a perfect night to see it. And a lot of buddies who even the ones that lived in high rises and stuff, they just went out to their balcony or rooftop patios kind of thing and got some really good shots. So I thought it would just be a couple streams of light or something, or you could maybe see a little wisp of it or something like that. But it was pretty full blown, not obviously like you're in Alaska or something like that, but it was it was cool to see for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, this topic has been I guess by the time this episode gets out, the game itself would have been out for probably about 10 days, I think, when this hits the public feed. So Jordan and I both have reviews up for this game. Jordan's over at NWR and mine at the Thirsty Mage. My review will not require, but will be more enjoyed if you play Bohemian Rhapsody in its acoustic form in the background while you read it. But yeah, there's we both enjoyed it, and we'll get into why and the different things about it. But it just kind of sparked this bigger picture view of there's so many games that come out now, literally hundreds a day it seems like, and a lot of them, especially indie RPGs, they're all seem to be very heavily inspired by bigger, different games, like Nintendo games in particular, inspire thousands of recreations or different viewpoints or different ways to play the game or whatever. So we thought we would just kind of go through some of the recent ones that we played and maybe kind of pinpoint what we like about these kind of not imitations, but these inspired by games, and what hopefully we'll see in the future.
I mean, sometimes imitations is not the wrong word to use, and I guess that's part of our discussion here, is what kind of terminology is fitting. What makes an imitation, what makes something more of an homage. I guess one thing that I want to start off, or maybe before we get into the game proper and the other games we want to chat about, is you have developers who kind of grew up playing these games, and I think that inspiration is obvious. And then it's how much are you inspired by something that you've seen before? How much is your art just a reflection of all the things that you've done and played and seen before? I think that's obviously part of this process. the game we're talking about, we can say it's called Athenian Rhapsody. And I believe it's a solo developer that worked on this game, Nico Papalia. His name is kind of one of the first things you see when you boot up the game. And it's clear that he's inspired by a game like Undertale. Like and I think that's fine. Like that's a good thing. You know, I don't want people to feel like, oh, I can't make something that is similar to another game. Like just make kind of make whatever you want to do, you know, like. But other games on this list, like they're maybe we've kind of broken it down into a couple of categories, like games that are inspired by The Legend of Zelda and games that are inspired by Metroid or Castlevania, like Metroidvanias, basically. And yeah, I like the idea of kind of thinking, you know, what elements are taken from this game, what elements are taken here, how did they change it, how did they kind of reshape it, remold it. I think those are kind of cool things to think about when you're getting into these games. I was going to say, like, the tough thing for me sometimes is when I'm doing a review or talking about a game on a podcast, like, is it okay to mention, like, or do that comparison kind of thing? Like, hey, like, this game does the same thing that we see in Undertale. This other game does the same thing we see in Legend of Zelda with the Wind Waker, right? Or Super Metroid or something. Like, is it okay to kind of continue to name drop those games as a point of reference to help people understand what a new game is doing? Like, how far can we go in our coverage of games in terms of linking them to previous titles? You know, like I guess I struggle with that. Like, it's a game like Athenian Rhapsody. If you say it's just like Undertale, like you're doing a pretty good job of saying what this game is like. And if you've played Undertale, you are going to have a good understanding of how Athenian Rhapsody works, right? So I guess it's just a bit tricky trying to talk about these games without mentioning other video games. Like I know that there are some reviewers out there who are very, very against name dropping, you know, or that's seen as a negative thing. But I think sometimes it can be helpful for sure.
Yeah, well, you ran into this problem with one of your recent reviews with Udian Chronicle. Like, how do you talk about Udian Chronicle without talking about Suikoden? Like, it's just,
you have to, for sure.
And it's funny too, because like it's, you know, there's going to be, well, even with Suikoden, I don't feel like it, you know, people talk about it like it's one of these greatest of all time RPGs, but then whenever I ask people if they played it, like, I would say that it's a very small percentage of RPG players have even played the game.
Yeah.
So you talk about it thinking like, oh, you know, oh, it's just like Suikoden, and then, but you could be alienating such a huge part of the community because they've never played it. Like, even with Athenian Rhapsody, like, you could say, like you said, you know, the best way to describe this game is it's exactly like Undertale. Well, it's like, well, if you haven't played Undertale, then you have no clue what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. And I guess with the Aiden Chronicle 100 Heroes, like, discussion, debate, coverage, review scores, all that stuff. Like, I'm kind of thinking back to some of the YouTube comments on the video that I made, and it's like, oh, like, you clearly, you know, don't like Suikoden or haven't played Suikoden or something like that. I'm like, I know what Suikoden is. Like, I finished the first one, I haven't started the second one, but I know kind of what that game is going for, and I understand why fans of, you know, Suikoden 1 and 2 would like this game, but that's not the only people. That's not the only group that's going to be buying this game, right? Like, that's the group that's probably already kickstarted it and given their money. So I'm not reviewing the game for you because you've already paid for it. But I am thinking about other people who have never really played a Suikoden game before and trying to let them know, here's what you're in for. Maybe you've heard like, oh, Suikoden's pretty good, or you know people that like it, but that's not necessarily the case that you are going to like it, or you're going to like this updated or new version that's coming out in 2024, right? So I guess I was kind of taking that perspective and trying not to mention in my review too many comparisons to Suikoden. And so, yeah, I guess it's about finding a balance, talking about games, indies or otherwise, in terms of other video games. I think it's tricky to kind of navigate that space, and how much comparison do you do and how much comparison is fair, I guess.
Yeah, and it's even trickier in this case because usually when you're talking about like an imitation, you're talking about an indie game that's replicating or inspired by a AAA game, or bigger studio game sort of thing. But
Yeah.
in this case, we've got two single developers. Like, Undertale is an indie game made by a single developer, and so is this one. So they're almost at odds with each other to a certain extent, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not, in those other cases. I always say, well, it's like apples and oranges. Like, how do you make a Zelda-like game when you're competing with a behemoth like Nintendo? Like,
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to, like, you're never going to get the same quality. Some of these indie games are amazing, but you've got like a handful of people up against, a team of 100 who have been doing this for 30 years. Like, it's just, it's tough. But in this case, you've just got a couple of single developers, putting it, I guess, in the case of Athenian Rhapsody, the chart has kind of been created by by Toby Fox. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would kind of say that Toby Fox kind of, like, that was a unique experience at the time. Like, it was kind of out of nowhere. I
Totally.
don't know if I've ever experienced a battle system like the one that was designed there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost uh you know pixel for pixel recreated in this game to a certain extent. So
Yeah, I guess I mean, we should probably get into it because I do want to talk about the battle system a lot. I think it's a fairly big part of my review, and there are. I mean, it would be doing a disservice to Athenian Rhapsody to say that it's just Undertale. Like, that there are a lot of ways that it differs as well. A lot of changes that kind of come into play that I think are worth looking at in more detail. But yeah, why don't we do impressions now? So I really liked it. I really thought that, even though, like, the feeling of playing it is very familiar to me as someone who's played Undertale multiple times, I think that it's super colorful. It does a really good job of kind of creating this vibrant world that Undertale doesn't really have. Like, Undertale is a lot more kind of simplified and basic, and just it's not as filled with things. There are a lot of parts of Undertale screens in Undertale where there's not a lot that you see kind of in your field of vision. But Athenian Rhapsody is just filled, like, just smashing the screen with color. Every area kind of looks different and has different color schemes. There's characters everywhere. There's a lot of enemies in the overworld that you have to avoid, or if you run into them, you can battle them. And just constant people to talk to that have a lot to say that might be dumb or stupid or funny, or kind of pointing you in the next direction. But it's a game that just feels a lot more full of stuff, full of content, I guess. It's not a long game by any means, and I do kind of understand why you might play it multiple times. We'll get into that later too, but I think it's just one that, like, kind of from a presentation standpoint, it kind of smacks you in the face. The music is incredible. Like, I can think kind of it's. I mean, it doesn't necessarily match the highs of Undertale, but I think it's a really, really great soundtrack. And in my video review, I tried to use like 3 or 4 different tracks just to give people a sample of the kind of things they're going to hear in Athenian Rhapsody. But yeah, really, really good soundtrack as well. And I guess that's one of the big departures for me, is the visuals, the audio that I think are really, really strong, and very, very kind of, especially visually, and what you're seeing on screen is just so much more in your face, colorful, beautiful, compared to Undertale, for sure. Those are some of the kind of first things that I noticed, I guess, when I started playing the game. What about you, David?
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment in this. Like, I think the thing that stands out most for me are the visuals. I played on a Steam Deck. I know you. I'm assuming you played on Nintendo Switch.
I did, yeah.
Given that it's for NWR, but yeah, like the entire screen just pops. Like, it's big, beautiful colors. Like, everything. I really like the art direction, I guess. Like, there really is no black anywhere. Like, it's like the background has color, and then like the foreground pops out, and then the pixels are kind of big and boisterous. So it's definitely kind of pops out that way. It lets you actually recreate, like, I would almost compare the main character that you play as almost like an Ash type from Pokemon, like the little kind of that sprite, like bigger obviously than in the Pokemon games, but kind of that generic, kid sort of look.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if you're allowed, like my sprite was always smiling, but then I started thinking like, oh, I think I chose that at the beginning of the game, because there's like, you choose the outfit and the hat, and I should probably have restarted one just to see if you could change the facial expression. But yeah, like you're kind of walking around again. They're one of the advertisements through the game, I guess, is that no one will have the same experience twice. Like it really seems like there's a lot of random generation, because there's actually some questionnaires that they ask you at the beginning, after like you put in your name, and then there's some questions, and I'm assuming that kind of has some kind of effect on the random generation. But the kind of crux of the game is very similar to Undertale, in that it's a human that's fallen into this monster world, and you're kind of, it seemed linear, like it looked like there's point A and point B, and for the most part you're walking the same path there. Now again, I don't know if the landscape changes when you play again, but there was a pretty set path that you would find, but then you could potentially run into different people depending on where you went or whatever. But it starts off the same way with like you run into the two characters. So it's Richard and James.
Yeah, they're so good.
Yeah. And they kind of set up the whole premise of the game, where it's like, you're the human who fell into the monster world, Athens, and I guess through some, I don't know if it was fully explained, but there's an experience system that has kind of been introduced to the world. So the monsters are all kind of fighting each other in this, trying to gain more experience. So sometimes you run into people like Richard, I think, is one of the ones that's kind of been feared in the world, because he's gained a lot of experience from defeating monsters, and that's one of the things that you actually run into with Richard, is that now I played what do you call it, the friendship mode or the no kill, I can't remember,
like a pacifist run kind of idea.
Pacifist role, yeah. So I wasn't actually fighting anyone, I was making friends with everybody, but Richard didn't believe me or whatever, so I ended up getting a fight with him. And so it's kind of, yeah, like there's this it's neat that you could replay it if you want to kind of see how things play out differently. Again, that was a similar thing in Undertale, where there was a pacifist route and a genocide route and a million options in between. But yeah, it's hard to. I enjoyed the humor there to a certain extent. Like there was maybe too many fart jokes.
Yeah,
one too many, three too many. I don't know. It seemed to pop up quite often, but I appreciated the writing to a certain extent, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that some of the humor is pretty lowbrow. I think that a lot of it can come from just the sound effects that are happening kind of randomly, like people exploding. There's like this green frog creature you run into, and he starts screaming wildly, and like,
oh yeah,
it's just like vibrating on the screen whenever you touch him. I think I countered him later at one point. He did calm down a little bit, but every other time I'd run into him, he would kind of go ballistic. And there's just lots of moments like that. Lots of the characters you talk to, and they explode, or they change color, or there's a coin figure that kind of begs you to like take money from him, and when you do, he gets depressed, or so he kind of turns color and like demands you give the money back. There's a lot of instances like that where a character, seemingly innocuous, like just an NPC, will ask you a question like, do you want to do A or B? And your choice is kind of recorded as part of your rhapsody, as part of your story that you're trying to, I guess, finalize. And that's the kind of another interesting way, I guess, that the game departs from Undertale, in that every playthrough is meant to be like its own kind of crystallized story version that you kind of save and you can share with other people. There's a whole like online system where you can take a playthrough. And I guess provide like a code or something to a friend, and they can kind of see how your playthrough went, like what kind of choices you made, what kind of character you were considered based on your actions. again, whether you're befriending enemies or fighting them, right? Like, I guess how you chose to do your playthrough. There's even like someone you run into in each zone that kind of records have you befriended all the enemies you could find here, right? Like just like in Undertale, where every area has like a few different monsters to encounter. The same thing in Bohemian. I'm gonna keep doing that. I think Athenian Rhapsody, where if once you've befriended everyone in the area, like that, this character will reward you with a badge, and so you have like this incentive, I guess, to find every kind of minor enemy you can in an area, befriend them, and then move on to the next one after that. And the enemies do kind of they're on the screen. They're on the screen. You kind of choose to run into them or not. But I guess, where they spawn is a little bit random. So sometimes you have to look around an area if you do want to befriend everybody before moving on to the next or moving on to the next town or something like that. I think the towns are great. Like they're so they're just a cacophony of color. Like every color in the rainbow or palette is represented in the towns, and I think that's one thing I really like about them. The buildings are just filled with kind of kooky, kind of weird, offbeat characters. There'll be like little missions you can do where someone's like, "Oh, you got to bring me this item," or you need to be holding something in your possession, in your pocket, I guess, before they'll let you into like a secret hideout, and then you might find items to use in there. You really don't know because what to expect from minute to minute, who you're going to run into, what kind of personality they're going to have, and what to do in the towns. And there's not too many town spaces. There's about maybe 3 or 4 towns. One of the, I guess not a town, but like one of the events or scenes, you're actually in a restaurant, and
Yeah.
there's kind of the shenanigans that go on there, and that was that. I enjoyed that part a fair bit. That was pretty cool. About halfway through the game, I guess.
This isn't the first time I burned down this restaurant.
That's right. That's right, exactly. There's later on, like you could even go into like a UFO to recruit a character, and there's these alien creatures that have a really funny look to them, as if they're like hand drawn, but also incorporating like a photograph or something as well.
Yeah.
They look pretty weird. But yeah, just every part of the game you visit, you're going to find something new and something interesting. And I think that's another thing that made Undertale so strong, is that every area of the game kind of felt really different and had like new bosses to fight, new music, new events to encounter, or places where you can kind of make decisions, I guess. There's more of that decision making happening in Athenian Rhapsody. And I guess as I say in my review, I was kind of curious how the game's going to be received and kind of, I suppose, shared in the community. Like, are people really going to gravitate towards this game and share all these rhapsodies and share how their stories went? I think that could lead to something really cool. The developers also talked about kind of adding on to this game, and so there could be. I wouldn't be surprised to see post-launch content, whether that's new areas or something. One thing I wanted to ask you about, David, was at some point in the game you get a swimsuit or swimming
I was just
gear.
about to ask you too.
Okay, yeah, and so
I never used it the entire time, but there was one section where you could swim like a little bit, and then but when you got to the opening, there was like alluded to that there might be content added to this area or DLC or something.
yeah, so okay, so we're kind of in lockstep here. I found the
Yeah.
exact same situation, and I was kind of like looking around for places where you could go into the water in like a meaningful way, and I couldn't really find it. So I wonder if that's something that is part of the game now that may be just used later to add a new area to the game or something like that. But it could also just be one of those things like that we haven't really discovered. I did encounter a lot of places where I'm like, oh, maybe I could have done this, or maybe I could go there, or there's some part of the game where you have to, I believe you have to like unlock all of the partner characters to get to like a new area or something like that. And unfortunately I just didn't have time to unlock everybody. I probably got about a little more than half, maybe 60-70% of the party members that you can recruit. But maybe we should, in thinking about that part, maybe we should touch on the combat a little bit. If you want to start there, David.
Yeah, so I'll try to describe it, and not simply by saying it's Undertale, because the way it works is that both Jordan and I did the passives route. So my understanding is that if you're doing a genocide route, it's kind of a turn-based combat in the general sense. But if you're trying to befriend the characters, it goes into this. It's like a mini game, I would say, where the square comes up, this black square comes up, and your character standing in it, and then and it's unique for each and every character where they'll try to hit your character with something. So if there's some things that come stand out to me is like there's this one clown enemy where there's like these two top hats and they're kind of circling around the square, and then they'll shoot like a ball at you, and so you've got to dodge the ball. And there's a character that shoots like fireballs along the ground, so you got to like jump over the fireballs, or like there's just tons of these different things where projectiles are being sent against your character and you've got to dodge them. That's basically what it is it's a mini game of dodging. So depending on what enemy you face, there's going to be something different that you have to dodge. Like sometimes you can kind of it's like top view where you can run around the entire square. Sometimes it turns into like a platformer where it's two-dimensional, where the character falls to the bottom and then you can jump.
Yeah, it felt like a little bit like Balloon Fight or something like that, or like an underwater stage, like in a Mario game where you have to kind of like paddle a little bit. There's actually one that's literally like a Balloon Fight or Joust, where you have to like, I don't know if it was a clown or something, but they have like a balloon over top of them, and you have to pop the balloon to kind of get out of the dodge 'em up mini game.
Yeah, there's even some that incorporate like a Space Invader style, where they give you a weapon and you're shooting straight up, and you're
that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
So they got those. There's a very late game one where you have to trigger this like circle that goes around. It's like this little dot that's circling around you, and you have to use that to hit like it's almost, it felt like a Zelda like boss, where it's like there's a heart on like the butt of the enemy.
Oh yes, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah,
and you've got to run around to the back so that the thing spinning around you hits that a few times, and then you can hit the character. And there's different forms like that. And so yeah, I would say it's pretty neat that way. I would even probably say that the system might be a little more robust than Undertale.
Yeah, I think there's more enemies or more different patterns you can find, right? Like all the bosses have multiple patterns, and then there's enough different kind of basic enemies in the different areas that I think more things are thrown at you overall. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and there's even different kind of phases. Like there's one character where you have that phase of trying to avoid things, but then to befriend him, you have to throw a basketball into a hoop.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah,
yeah. So it's, and it was very simple. Like you use the control stick to go up, and then you bring it down, and using the momentum, you have to like release the button at the right time, and I would even argue there's not a whole lot of proficiency to it because the hoop is moving at the same time.
Yeah, so that was a hard one. That took me a few shots for sure.
Yeah, you almost have to just get lucky to a certain extent.
Yeah, you got to time it.
So there's a few like big screen. Like that's the other thing is like I feel like the entire screen real estate is being used in some of these combats.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I would say that if you played Undertale and the thing you liked a lot about the game was that combat system, I think you'll appreciate this one more just because there's a lot more to it too. Like it seems like there's a lot more focus on that, a lot more variety, and and more like more colorful, more of everything, I guess, in the combat system.
Yeah, I mean, I guess adding on to that, there's a couple of mechanics built into it too, because it's quite tough actually. Like I found, and David, I think we shared this experience as well, that some of the like mid to late game boss fights are pretty tricky, and you have to have a bunch of healing items. There's also a mechanic called Burst that your character has access to, which is kind of like a magic meter, basically.
Yeah.
And so the spells that you have available to you, one is just a basic healing spell, uses about a third of your full meter. The second one, I think one makes you faster inside the box, so your character trying to do the dodging mini game speeds up, and so it's easier to dodge the projectiles coming at you because your little avatar gets to move faster. I think one of them like powers you up as well, or makes your attack stronger or something. I never used it because I was doing the pacifist run as well. Do you remember what that middle option was, David? I think it's the middle one.
Yeah.
Or maybe makes you more impervious to damage or something.
Yeah. The other thing that you can do too, if you're struggling in the boss battles, is there's a chill mode.
Yes, yeah.
And what that does is, I would say it is essentially just doubles your health, because what happens is when you get hit, your character has a ice shield. Like,
Yeah.
you basically turn into an ice cube, so that the next time you hit it, then the ice cracks, and then you're back to normal. Now, depending, I know, like, I had used it for a couple bosses because I'm like, I'm just like, I just
Yeah, me
want to
too.
move on. So I turned chill mode on, and I think sometimes, like, if you're getting hit multiple times, like, because there's a delay of the ice when it leaves you, so you could potentially be like saving yourself from a few shots if they're all kind of at once. But I would say, generally speaking, it doubles your HP.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's worth turning on. I'd say for anyone who's finding the game too tough. It is a challenging game, I think, on the whole. Even some of the later game areas where there's like the UFO in particular, there's a lot of like kind of energy fields and like circles on the screen that you have to avoid. There'll be moments in the game where you're just walking along an area, and all of a sudden the whole area become like a forest becomes like the dodge 'em up mini game, and you're having to like dodge like birds or knives being thrown at you or anything like that. And so every area can become like treacherous, I guess. And
Yeah.
your health meter will be shown on the screen, like big kind of graphics in the top left corner. There might be a meter that's timing everything. And so that's one of the, I guess, nice kind of surprises about the game, is that as you go through it, like, you are kind of constantly being hit with unexpected events or scenarios, whether that's, danger that kind of pops up out of nowhere, or characters, or what's funny sometimes and annoying as well is when your traveling partner will just kind of constantly interrupt your walking with like some stupid thing to say. Like, it's not anything meaningful, but they all do it. As soon as you switch to a new party member, the first like couple of screens, they'll keep interrupting your walking by just saying something completely inane and useless. Usually, it's sometimes funny, but like, it's just an odd thing that I haven't really seen before, of like the characters seemingly like having their own personalities and wanting to interject and stop your walking, and the fact that you literally stop so that the dialogue can play. I know it's one of those kind of almost like Family Guy type joke, where you're kind of doing the same thing over and over again, right? I guess it got a bit of that kind of humor in parts of Athenian Rhapsody.
Were you switching characters often, or did you have anyone in
I
particular?
did. I mean, I just to kind of see what they would say. I rarely use them in combat, so that's another thing we mentioned. We didn't mention about the combat, is that you can switch in your partner character, and they can take some hits for you, and they have their own like little abilities. I find that would be more useful to someone who's actually attacking the enemies, as opposed to the pacifist route. If you're just befriending, I don't know how useful it would be to switch in your allies. But if you are like fighting everyone that you encounter, like having basically an extra health meter and new abilities to take their health down, take enemies' health down, would be useful for sure, and probably make the game easier. Actually, I think the pacifist route is probably the hardest way to go through the game, I'd say.
Yeah, and I think like, I had Gilroy, which is for a lot. Horatio and Gilroy, I think, were the ones I had the longest.
Yeah.
But there was, I don't know if you ran into this, if they're near the end of the game, you can end up in Gilroy's house, like where he lives, and his mom's in there.
Yeah. I did go there. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you steal the mom's credit card?
Oh, because he's trying to buy something in like a Fortnite
Yeah.
like game or something like that, right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we did. I think we
Yeah.
did. So we could buy
Oh
it with
man,
everyone.
if you don't want a spoiler, I got skip ahead 10, 15, 20 seconds. But yeah, the mom gets on the phone, and Gilroy's like, I need to buy this. And so he goes, get my mom's, I don't know what the name for the credit card is. So you
Yeah,
grab
out
it
of her
from the
purse. Yeah.
purse, and then you just walk over to the console, and you're like swiping the card on the console, and like he's going nuts, and you're maxing out the credit card. And
Yeah.
it's like Fortnite purchases that he's
V-Bucks or something. Yeah.
yeah, and he's just loving it, or Gilroy's just going nuts, and I just
I
thought that
think
was hilarious.
those are some of the best moments. Like there's another one where you go, like Richard basically invites you to dinner at their house, and he and James live together. and the dinner's a disaster. Like nothing, it's like something like falls from this, like leftovers like fall from the ceiling, and you end up eating that or something like that. Like his dinner doesn't work out. He leaves it in the oven or something, and it disintegrates. Like there's just like a lot of those kind of interior spaces, I suppose, that you could very, very easily miss. Like I think you are rewarded from a discovery standpoint of going back to earlier parts of the game. And there is a fast travel kind of mechanism that allows you to do that. But going back to earlier parts of the game to recruit new characters, to revisit with old ones that you saw a long time ago, or you haven't checked in on a while, just to see like where they are and like what kind of thing have they invited you to. And I'm not saying like there's a ton of those different events with each character, but there's one or two, and that they're all pretty, charming or funny or stupid, and it's worth just seeing what people are up to. Yeah, but I did try to switch characters a fair bit just to see how that might affect my Rhapsody at the end, or just to kind of see what dialogue they would pop up with as we were walking along. Just to get to know them a little bit more. But yeah, there were a lot. There probably 6 or 7 characters I didn't recruit, and I don't even know who they are necessarily, or where to find them. I may have kind of run into them in the overworld and just hadn't activated the right sequence or pattern or whatever to get them to join me. So
yeah, there's 16 unique party members.
16, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah,
I might have got 8.
Yeah, I think I might have had 1 or 2 more than that, because like I said, I went back through the game kind of not start to finish, but I walked through almost every area, and that does not that takes you super long. It doesn't, but I walked through most of the main areas again just to see like who I could add. I did add a couple of extra folks to the party, and so yeah, I think it's a game that my kind of one of my final thoughts about it was that it rewards you for taking your time. I think it's not the best experience to go through super fast. And so if you're reviewing the game and just trying to finish it as fast as possible, I think it's very easy to miss the heart of the game, which is just this kind of kooky and crazy world filled with, equally weird and ridiculous folks, and just talking to them and exploring very slowly and seeing what's around the corner, or what's in this area, or this house that I haven't been into, or maybe this house is locked, but if I come back to it later, there'll be something funny that happens inside. And usually there is. There's in one of the towns has a bicycle shop that's just like Pokemon. And all the characters are talking about like, the bikes are so cool, let's get a bike. And you go up to the counter and he's like, oh yeah, we don't have any bikes for you. or like, or we want to give you one, but we don't have any, or something like that. Or I think he just refuses to give you one. Like they have bikes, but he's like, no, I'm not going to give you one. And I've been thinking like, oh, it'd be nice to walk a little bit faster in this world. We wish the running speed were a little bit faster. I'm like, oh, at the bike store, I'll get a bike. It'll be just like Pokemon. And sure enough, no, you can't actually get a bike, or maybe you can. And I screwed it up somehow. It wouldn't shock me.
I couldn't get one either. So
no, okay.
Maybe neither of us figured it out. If you can,
yeah, maybe that's an post-launch update or something. But yeah, there's a lot here for fans of Earthbound and Undertale. There's a lot of the Earthbound kind of characters, enemies, and humor. And just like Undertale as well. I just think it's a little bit more in your face and a little bit more. It dips into the immature, certainly, but I think on the whole the writing's quite good, and I did have quite a good time with it. So, yeah,
I have all the same thoughts, I guess, of like kind of final impression of pretty solid game, like you said. If very chill game, so totally, it's, if you're going in, it's
outside of some of the combat.
that's the well, sometimes it's nice to have the contrast though, I guess, where it's like it's fairly chill, but then it gives you your like if you want to have some kind of difficulty or some kind of challenge in the game and not just kind of breeze through it, then the boss battles certainly provide that challenge towards it, so it's not just you're not breezing through the whole thing for sure. But yeah, and like you said, there's ways to kind of get through those boss battles if they're challenging, like with the chill mode. And then I was really stocking up on
just bring a bunch of items if you stock up. Yeah,
I would usually go to there was they had these like concession stand sort of thing, where
Yes,
these
yes.
like two little animals like had this. It reminded me of back in the 80s. I don't think they exist. Well, they probably exist still, where there was like the popsicles, like the guy on the bike,
Oh
like he
yeah,
had like,
of course,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's what it kind of reminded me of, like one of those traveling
I think
like
that's what they were going for, something like that. Yeah.
yeah. So I would usually like stock up on, I think there was like a chocolate bar that pretty much maxed out your health, because I think you get like 20 health, and the chocolate bars give you like 12 or 16 health or something. So, and they were pretty cheap. So,
Yeah, and
but
if you're
at the end
playing,
of the game, like I think I had a ton of money and never even
yeah, me
used it.
too,
So,
me too. If you're
yeah,
playing pacifist, your life meter never grows because you're not leveling up, right? So
yeah,
you are stuck with the 20 HP, which does make it a little bit harder. So you just want to
yeah.
buy a bunch of items, stock up, fill your pockets with items, basically.
Though there was a suit. I don't know if you got it, and I can't remember what it was called, but there was a suit, like a dragon armor or something that increased your defense. But it was hilarious because when you put it on, the only thing that changed is I put sunglasses on.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, I never really noticed the armor or the items that you equip kind of changing your appearance too much. I may
yeah,
have missed that armor. I did pick up some things that did boost my defense, and I was kind of checking how the stats would change. I did see the defense stat go up, so I'm like, okay, this surely is protecting me a little bit more to some extent. But
yeah,
yeah, I guess that is like I said, one of the parts, the trickier parts of being a pacifist is you're not worrying too much about your equipment. I guess or maybe you do have to worry about your armor a little bit more. But I found myself just making sure that at least half of the items in my pocket were healing items, and if I would just kind of quickly use the ones that only healed like 3 or 5 health, and stock up on chocolate bars, things you mentioned, like that
yeah.
restore 10 to 15 or something, and it's pretty good the whole way through with that.
I completely forgot too that you could store items.
Yeah, yeah. But the funny thing is, the storage is only about as big as your pocket, so
Yeah,
it really only doubles your holding capacity. And I quickly ran out of storage space too, actually, because I was holding on to a bunch of like just random items. I had no idea what they actually did, and there's a lot of those that people will just give you or you can buy, and it doesn't really say what it does, or just makes
yeah,
a loud like honking sound or something. I'm like, what does this even do? And maybe you're supposed to use it somewhere. Like I got the sense that there's items you pick up and you're supposed to use them somewhere specific, but just that kind of experimentation I unfortunately didn't have time for.
yeah. So I guess at the end of the day, to kind of wrap up the Athenian Rhapsody, I think we would both agree that even though it's clearly heavily inspired by and borrows an extreme amount from Undertale,
Yeah.
it does enough to differentiate itself, I would say.
Oh yeah, I think it does stand on its own 2 feet, and I think someone who's never played Undertale before would have a really kind of eye opening experience, and would maybe want to go back to Undertale if this is their first game in that kind of subgenre, I guess. But if you've played Undertale and you're looking for more of that, like this does feel like more of that. Just a little bit very very fresh coat of paint, and some maybe a little bit more in terms of exploring and secrets, and people to talk to. Just certainly more dialogue to experience for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I guess before we wrap up the episode, we did want to just touch base a little bit, like you said at the beginning, about the different indie games that people may. I think our audience might have heard most of these for the most part, but it's
yeah.
still worth going over because sometimes you always hear about. I added one game that I didn't know about, that I don't know if you know about,
I
that
know
I
the
actually
name.
want
I
to.
know the name, but I don't think I've ever played it.
Yeah. So we'll start with, I think, yeah, like I think the two most common games that get inspirations from are the 2Ds, or not even 2D. I'll call them Zelda
Just
likes,
Zelda,
because
yeah. Just
yeah,
Zelda.
because not only is it's there's tons of 2D, but then there's also plenty of Wind Waker-esque types. So Zelda like is the best way to put it. And I think a few of the best ones, I'm like, there's Blossom Tales, which would be like the 2D version, I guess.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's very similar to like A Link to the Past or something like that. Yeah, or Link
yeah,
Between Worlds. And then there's two of those. There's Blossom Tales and the sequel. I like the first one a little bit better, but they're so similar. They're so similar to like they're just 2D Zelda games basically. And so if you like those and you're familiar with them and you want another one, like I think both of those two Blossom Tales games are fine examples of Zelda likes for sure.
Yeah, and then there's Tunic and Oceanhorn, I guess would be kind of your Wind Waker inspired by Tunic. So I played Tunic on pretty sure it was on Game Pass at
Yeah, it's
one
on
point.
Game Pass. That's where I played it too.
Yeah, it was, to me, it almost felt like a combination of Wind Waker, like combat, or that 3-dimensional, but then it's going for the 2D dungeon crawling aesthetic of a Zelda.
Yeah, it's trying to be like
And
the first Zelda game, right? Where it doesn't
yeah,
really handhold too much, where you're supposed to kind of figure things out.
yeah, I think it's good, and I get the hype behind it. I don't know if I was totally in though. Like it I don't know. It was like it was missing a je ne sais quoi for me.
Yeah, I played only like an hour or so, and I liked what I played. I found it very tough actually, and I just wasn't in the mood for a super tough game at that time. And it's funny that it kind of jives with the look of the game, which is very kind of mellow and cartoonish to an extent. It's a very good looking game. It's gorgeous actually.
Yeah,
But yeah, I just wasn't in the mood for its difficulty, I guess,
yeah.
at the time.
Maybe that's what it was for
But I
me.
do want to
Maybe
go.
it was just like it was a little more hard. Like it's harder than a Zelda game,
Yeah, it's quite punishing.
and it kind of threw
Not
me
as
off,
easy
I
to
guess.
get to restore your health. Like in a Zelda game, like, there's always hearts everywhere, but in Tunic, like I think there's fewer ways to heal yourself. I guess like so you kind of have to be very cautious and careful. But I do want to play through it a little bit more before I kind of decide if I want to finish it.
So this game, I when I was googling the Zelda likes to see what I wanted to write down, I came across this is a PS1 game of all things,
Yeah,
and I've
yeah,
never heard of this game before, Alundra. But
yeah.
apparently, it was like Sony's attempt at a Legend of Zelda game on the PS1.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
Alundra's a game that I've heard of. I don't think I've ever played it, and I don't really know personally anyone who's played it either. But
no,
I am curious about it now. I got to take a look here. It
yeah,
looks really cool. It looks
well,
like
yeah, I
Illusion of
watched
Gaia or something like that.
yeah, I
Or
watched.
Suikoden actually looks exactly like
Yeah,
Suikoden.
it does.
Jeez.
I watched a or a walkthrough of it, and it was just like, oh, this is interesting. Like, there's definitely, it looks like a dungeon with puzzles and stuff. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, interesting to me.
If I'd had a PS1, I probably would have played this. It looks really good. Like
Yeah.
I wonder if we can get it on Vita or something like that still.
Yeah. Now you got Shovel Knight on here. I don't think I wrote that down, did I?
Yeah, I put that there. I
Okay.
think a Shovel Knight is it borrows from a lot of different games, so obviously, but
Yeah.
just in terms of like an indie game, kind of copying, being a carbon copy, or being heavily inspired. Like Shovel Knight is so kind of it owes so much to what came before, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just a combination of different things. Like it has Zelda like Zelda 2 specifically inspiration in terms of its combat. And the way
Yeah.
the way the villages work and the way you talk to people, it's exactly like Zelda 2. Obviously, Mega Man, DuckTales, like a lot of other games it's been inspired by as well. But to me, it's one of those like, oh, this feels so much like a game from the 80s and early 90s, like that I couldn't help but put this one as a at least a Zelda like on the list or something like that. It's one of those like it copies from the past, but man, it does a good job of it.
Yeah. It's funny because like this would be, I don't know if they could ever get, I almost wonder if they have made it for an NES cartridge, but if this was an NES cartridge back in the day, like this might be like top 3 NES games.
Oh,
You
for
know?
sure, for sure. Yeah, I think that's again, that's what whenever I play this game or think about it, I'm like, how did we not get this on the NES? Like,
Yeah.
and I understand now why, because it's a combination of so many of all those classic NES experiences put together, right? And years of people having played those and wanting to make their own version. This is what it turned out to be. It's just this wonderful combination of classic NES experiences.
Yeah. And then the other subgenre that we see tons and tons, especially
Mhm.
lately, is the Metroid or the Metrovania likes. I know, like I've been playing the second Axiom Verge, but I know that the The first one a lot of people enjoyed.
Yeah.
We did an episode on Deedlight. I can't remember the rest of the title. It was
Oh
a very long
gosh, yeah,
title.
I was thinking about that too when I saw Deedlit. I'm
It's
like,
like,
it's like another 4 or 5 words. It's
yeah,
pretty long. Like, oh, that's gonna bug me. Like the adventures of something or the experience
yeah.
of something.
But I'm pretty sure that was. I don't know if it's still on Game Pass because I feel like it was a year or two ago that we did it. But I played that one on Game Pass and it was fantastic. Very much reminded me of playing Symphony in the Night.
Oh, it's so yeah, so similar to Symphony of the Night,
Yeah.
which is like the prototypical Metroidvania at this point. Yeah, Record of Lodos War, Deedlit in Wonder Labyrinth. Like
Yes, that's
there's
it.
no way we're
Oh
gonna
man,
get it, but
what a mess.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah. The ongoing running joke is waiting for Silk Song, but I know Hollow Knight, the original Hollow Knight. I've played like 15 minutes of it,
Mm-hmm.
and then I don't know. I just fell off it at the time. I think I was like trying to cram it in between like some other big things I was playing, but I know even just based off all of the hype that people have for Silk Song and the all of the ongoing like where is it
Yes,
you
exactly.
know.
Constantly, every single direct, whatever company
Yeah.
has a direct, like they're begging Silk Song to show up there, even though it's almost certainly going to be at an Xbox presentation at some point down the line.
Yep, and then the messenger. Actually, the one of the ones I forgot to put in for Zelda like that I wanted to mention was Moonlighter.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I
Very
think
similar.
one of the things about Moonlighter is it's kind of the perfect example of taking the inspire, like they're taking Zelda obviously, but then they're adding some kind of unique thing, and the fact that the reason you're going into the dungeons is that you're trying to like fill up your pockets so that you can come sell it the
That's
next
right.
morning.
Yeah.
Like to me, that's really where I want the indie games to go. Like I don't need a carbon copy of these games. Like you don't need to recreate, you know, Zelda,
Yeah. Yeah.
because to me it's like Nintendo knows how to make it. Like you're never gonna like if I wanted to play just a pure Zelda, I would go like I'd play Minish Cap or I'd play Link Between Worlds or I'd play Link to the
Mhm.
Past. Like I don't need just a copy of like, oh well, here's some new dungeons. It's like, well no, like there's Nintendo's made enough of these games now. Like, you know, there's probably one you haven't played or you haven't played in a while. But when you take something like Moonlighter, now it's saying like, oh, you know, you enjoy that style, that combat, it's gonna feel familiar. But then here's this new, unique system or mechanic or part of this game that you can't play anywhere else. But it just adds that more playability, that more
Yeah.
fun to the experience. You know?
Yeah, I think adding like a new genre on top of something, or having like different genre elements within a game that you're familiar with, right, or looks familiar, it plays like something like a Zelda game or like a Metroid game, but then on top of that, there's like a whole other layer that you've never seen in any of those games before. That's really cool. Moonlighter does a really good job of having you moonlight as the Link character, right? The adventuring is that's your second job, right? Your first job is running the shop and making money and stuff like that. That's a really good example. I suppose in a lot of the games that we kind of just ran through here, they don't necessarily do that. Like they don't necessarily do something like do a new genre necessarily. They're just trying to be maybe exactly what you kind of expect, like Oceanhorn is exactly like Wind Waker. Like it's no more no less. It looks different, obviously a slightly different perspective, but it's trying very hard to be Wind Waker because maybe someone wants another Wind Waker. Maybe we want that experience again. And so I understand why these exist. Like, yeah, you could go back and play the one you really like, but what if you love Wind Waker, you love Link to the Past, you just want more games like that? Like these games are filling that niche, I suppose. But I appreciate what you're saying, David, of wanting more from them, wanting like something different. I guess like you'd be happy to just go back to the original. But I mean that's you and me and a handful of our listeners to an extent. Is this we're very happy to go back and replay games that we've loved from the past. I know a lot of other folks who maybe didn't grow up with these games. Like they want these new experiences from different developers that and then maybe they can go back and play the original version, right? Like maybe there's people out there who will play Blossom Tales first and then go play Link to the Past, or play Oceanhorn and then Wind Waker might come out on Switch, or you play the Wii U version. Who knows, right? But you might play one of these first and then go back to what inspired them. So I think that's kind of cool, right? Is to appreciate that indie games are also shedding light on how they came about and what inspired their creation. And so it lets us go back. It's not always like us, who are a little bit older, who have played the games that came before, and then we play these new indie versions and we're like, oh, it's great, but we could do something different. There's other people going in the other direction, right? They're starting with the indies and then going back to the originals, and so they get a really cool experience too. Like, imagine playing Axiom Verge first and be like, oh, I really like games like this, and then discovering Super Metroid, and it's blowing your mind, right? Like, oh, this is just like Super Metroid, like, or just like Axiom Verge, like that. I think there's value in that kind of transaction, or that event taking place too.
That was me with Symphony of the Night.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Right. We play like Bloodstained and other games like that, and then we're like, oh yeah, Symphony of the Night. I haven't played this yet, and it's incredible, right? Like, it's so good.
Yeah.
I did want to just quickly shed a little bit more light on Hollow Knight, and maybe the Messenger to an extent. I added the Messenger to the list. Hollow Knight, it's not exactly like a Metroid game or a Metroidvania or something like that. Like, yes, it is those kind of games, but it really, I think, reinvents that genre, such that it's now games not just being Metroidvanias, but it's a Hollow Knight kind of game, and we'll see how Silksong kind of builds on that original, but it's the atmosphere, really, more than anything, that I think Hollow Knight borrows from Metroidvania games, Metroid games in particular. That feeling of being alone and that you're in these claustrophobic kind of environments, locales, and that you don't really know necessarily where you're going next, or even necessarily what to do there. There's so much of you're pushing and exploring in the unknown. I think that these indie games that are inspired clearly by other games or genres, when they really nail the feeling of those games, I think that, to me, that's the most attractive thing. Is when I play a game, like, oh, this feels, it doesn't just look like it or borrow the gameplay mechanics of something, but I feel like I'm kind of in that world again, but of course it's different too. There's an unknown quality to it simultaneously. I really like when that happens. Like, and then the Messenger, like, you're playing the Messenger, like, oh, this feels like a Ninja Gaiden. It feels like, I guess later on in the game, where it becomes more like a Metroidvania, and you're kind of teleporting from area to area, is a little more Symphony of the Night-esque, I suppose. But then the combat, the action is so dynamic, and it just feels really good to play. Not to mention the soundtrack being awesome. Like, there's even presentation elements in these games that can be really, really striking. The music, the way they look, and just the overall atmosphere of them can really be compelling too. So, indie carbon copies. The question is, are they good? Like, yeah, I think they are good. I think that I don't mind seeing these. Yes. It's great when they depart from what inspired them, and I'm just speaking for myself here. But I'm okay with seeing developers, whether that's solo developers or teams, kind of do their spin on something that we've already seen before. I want to see that spin. I like it. I have no problem with that. I hope to see more of that as we go forward. People have been saying, with all the studio closures, like, indies are like that space where they're kind of carrying the industry in a way. Like, they're still coming out, they're still being great, they're still I hope they are profitable and can continue to fund themselves and have more of these experiences. So that's important to me, for sure.
It seems to be where most of the innovation is coming from these days, because with margins getting smaller and smaller, it seems like the bigger studios are having, like, they're less willing to take risks. So yeah, I feel like a lot of the new innovative mechanics and gameplay and that is coming from the indie space, and starting to work its way into the bigger publishers, which is hilarious.
And but that's a risk too, right? An indie developer saying, I'm going to do something completely different, or I'm going to take a familiar genre and kind of add something really new to it. Like that's a risk too. Like, you might be passionate about that and want to do that, but are people going to be receptive to it?
Well, and this could be their one shot too. When you think of like how many developers, like, this is a lot of indies. It's not even it's like a part-time job. You know, they go and they work a day job, but they come home and then they put a bunch of hours into making a game, and it takes, a couple of years, and then, that a lot of it can just come down to, like, did it get released at the right time? Did it get seen by the right person? And then, that could make or break their career. That could be the end, or that could be the beginning of something more,
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for everybody. Like, I feel for, the folks who are being let go from their jobs, even though they've had a lot of success, like we saw, with Hi-Fi Rush and Tango Studio, Tango Gameworks, sorry.
Yeah.
But then the same thing could kind of happen to an indie developer if they're just not, if they're not seen, there's no visibility, or if their Kickstarter kind of fizzles out, like, they might not get that chance either. So it's tough. I'm glad that we can use our platform to, put a spotlight on indie games. I always appreciate when we're able to do that. And Athenian Rhapsody is just another example of one that I think is worth having a look at for sure. And whether games are borrowing, copying, using, inspired by, like, whatever terminology you want to use, I think then it doesn't really matter. It's more just kind of like, how do you feel about the game when you're playing it? How does it look? Does it strike you? Is it kind of hitting those notes that you are looking for? And I think for me it did. And a lot of the games that we just kind of ran through, they all kind of strike those chords for me as fans as a fan of, like, Zelda games and Metroid games, and a fan of Undertale and Earthbound. Like, there's so many games that are made by people who clearly love those genres and those previous titles. So it's cool. It is good.
Cool. Well, I think we answered that question fairly well, and we'll probably wrap this one up.
Sounds good. Yeah. So thanks everybody for joining us for a discussion of Athenian Rhapsody and a couple of other smaller titles and where they came from. I think thinking about, what games have been inspiring to developers is always neat. And what games even games that inspire us to check out new things too. But yeah, that'll do it for this week's episode. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you have time and you can leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify, we would really appreciate it. It helps other people find the podcast. It's always really great to see. You can join our Discord channel as well. We'll be back soon with another episode. I'm not sure if we have. I'm trying to think if there's another big release that we're planning to cover, but I'm trying to think of, have we gotten through most of the big releases that we'd been chatting about for so long?
I almost think the next big release is Trails Through Daybreak.
Yeah, that might be right. There's one other one I'm thinking of. There's the Elden Ring DLC, but I don't think it's dated yet. Unless it's just a generic. It was dated because Final Fantasy 14 DLC got pushed back because of it. Right. Yeah. Okay. I want to say it's in July. Yeah, I was gonna say June, or maybe the DLC's in June, and is it Endwalkers? Shadow of, you're thinking of Final Fantasy 14. This is Shadow of the Earth Tree. No, it's June 20th. Oh, it is June. It's really soon. Yeah, I thought, I kept thinking June, because it's close to my brother's birthday, and I know he and I are both going to be really into that. Yeah, so that's definitely one next month. I will absolutely be sharing impressions on the Elden Ring DLC. Yep, and then Trails Through Daybreak will be a good one too. Hopefully the Switch port doesn't explode. That would be nice. That'll be a miracle. It's definitely long in the tooth for those kind of games there. But yeah, no, we'll definitely have more content coming soon on the next episode. So thanks everyone again for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next week on The Thirsty Mage. Bye for now. Bye.